time for the Onyx News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Onyx News Podcast, Margie K.
Good evening and welcome everyone to Onyx News. I'm your host, Margie K. And before we get rolling tonight, I just want to remind you about my new book that just came out by myself and Violet Wisdom, How to Research a Haunted House. And this, of course, is good for paranormal investigators, homeowners, and renters. We'll give you a lot of information about how to find a background on your property and why it might be haunted. And there's nothing else out there like it. So please check that out. Also, our 2025 calendar for the Onyx Network is available. We have put in all of the weird national holidays in that calendar. Not all of them, but a lot of them that are really strange. So please check that out at onyxnetwork.com. Tonight, my special guest is Clyde Lewis. He's a renowned radio host, producer, and conspiracy theorist, best known for his dynamic and thought-provoking show, Ground Zero. Clyde Lewis has carved a niche in the realm of broadcast radio with his unique blend of investigative journalism and discussion of paranormal phenomena. Clyde was born in Murray, Utah, and has always had an innate curiosity about the world's mysteries, which led him to a career in radio broadcasting. Over the years, his passion for exploring the unusual and unexplained has captured the attention of listeners worldwide. He began his career in radio in the early 1990s, quickly gaining recognition for his articulate and engaging style. His show, Ground Zero, first aired in the mid-90s and has since become a staple in late-night radio. And, of course, we carry Ground Zero right here on the network. And welcome to the show, Clyde.
I'm so glad to be here. It was great. It was great talking with you the other night, actually, on my program. It was weird because I saw you in my feed, and I'm wondering, what is Margie up to? And then you call me, and I'm like going, wow, that's synchronicity. So it was great to hear from you. It was great to have you on the show for a little bit of time. So it's good that we're back together again.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I've wanted to have you on the program for quite some time. And I thought, you know what? This is the time because of these massive UFO and drone sightings worldwide. We are in the middle of a conundrum where nobody is giving us any explanations for these things. And you have been on top of it. You've been covering this extensively on your show. And I just wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit tonight to see what you think about some of these weird theories and what you think really might be going on. I had my own sightings the last 2 nights and got video. Now, oddly enough, the first night I was able to get some pictures and some video, and I'm just going to show these here real quick. My husband kept saying, I see something hanging down from this thing. Well, I didn't until I took a picture and I saw this one. He and I were together. And then here's one. It looked kind of just very ill-defined. And then this was a distance picture from the place where we were stopped. A lot of these UFOs or drones or both are kind of this very strange morphine item or object or whatever, lights. Some of them don't seem to be steady and like an object, like a hard, inanimate object. They seem more flowing, like there's something living. Have you seen some of the videos and stills that are along those lines?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of them, and quite frankly, in the beginning, it was sort of a novelty to me. I always say, when we're dealing with things coming out of the sky, they are a threat to national security, regardless of what, you're being told. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this is a novelty. People are seeing a few drones here and there, and that happens. And sometimes they're mistaken for UFOs. But then when I started noticing that we've had, 50 or 60 in the sky, when you consider that, in the horizon, when you look up at the stars, you get about 900 or so that you can see from the sky or from the ground because of light pollution. So you figure if you have that many stars that you can only see, how many of those are drones and how many of those are filling the skies, and how threatening that might be, because it doesn't look, in the nighttime, especially, because those drones look like classic UFOs, or they, if you avoid the rudder lights of red and green, some of them have, but if you look at them, a lot of them are new. And think of this, they say they're the size of an SUV. Well, why don't we stop and think about one of the biggest SUVs I can think of, and that would be an Escalade, which is a Cadillac Escalade. Think of something that big with wings, or something that big with rotors flying over your house. I think that's a little, the payload there is going to be pretty high with a vehicle that big.
It is very intimidating to see something like that. I have a witness in Sugar Creek, very, very close to me. She had one of these very large SUV-sized drones land on top of her house 2 nights ago. And then she said it shook the entire house. It was like the house was in an earthquake. And then by the time she got her camera and ran outside, it was way up in the sky. It had left. And I know people are having encounters like this. They're seeing strange things happen with these drones. And in fact, I wrote an article about it the other day. When I first heard about this, and indeed when I was listening to your show about it, I thought they were our military or a bad actor. It just had to be one of those things. But then there were some strange things that came up, Clyde, that I've noticed with them, and that correlate with UFO sightings. And I've been a UFO investigator for a long time, so this stood out to me. So car clocks and microwave and stove clocks change time when one of these objects flies overhead. You think of that with a UFO sighting. You don't think of that with a standard drone sighting. What kind of energy is being created to cause that? Camera batteries drain instantly in, personal drones, people trying to follow these things, or their regular camera just drain instantly. That happens a lot with UFO sightings. The size, like you mentioned, of an SUV is far larger than any hobby drone. And if commercial drones can be that big, but they're extremely expensive. It's not something that probably somebody's going to throw 50 of these up at the same time. That just doesn't make sense. They've been seen in restricted airspace around airports, military facilities, including the Capitol building, but none of them have been shot down. So we ask why, and you have brought that up often. Some of the drones are seen after a large boom is heard. And we're hearing these large booms in Kansas City, been hearing them all over. One of my theories about that is, because I study portals, would it be possibly a portal opening, making that boom sound, and then the drones come out of it? Some of the so-called
very well
drones
could be. Stuff that we don't know about, science we don't know about, where they're opening up some electromagnetic rift, going through that electromagnetic rift. Imagine the possibilities. Back in the day, where Bob Lazar had talked about the flying ships he saw at Area 51, many of them, he said, would actually go in at a diagonal level. They would raise up, and then it's like they would pull the area towards them. So it's like the idea of pulling the atmosphere, everything. So instead of flying, it would pull it to it, meaning that there would be a lot of energy there to yank that forward. And you can imagine, when lightning strikes, you imagine what happens to the ripple effect in the air. That air compression makes something that sound like a boom or thunder. Doesn't matter if it's, a plane going through a sound barrier or what. That rippling effect within the air is where you hear your thunder.
There you go. I knew you'd have an answer to that. What is your overall? I mean, when you first heard about this, what were your thoughts about it, and have they changed since?
Well, my thoughts about it were that this was, if you remember, I guess it was like 39 days before the event happened. It was Cliff High that said on December 3rd there was going to be an alien invasion.
Yes.
And we laughed at that and kind of snickered about that. But then on December 3rd, when I was doing my show, I was doing an up-to-the-minute report on these drones because they were everywhere. And it sounded like a UFO invasion, all the way down to the point where the UFOs or whatever they were seen in New Jersey, which was reminiscent of the War of the Worlds with Orson Welles when he stated that Grover's Mill was where the aliens had landed. I've been to Grover's Mill. It's a beautiful place. And I just thought to myself, how ironic, how synchronistic that the so-called War of the Worlds 2.0 is happening in New Jersey, and what's going on is maybe what they're seeing are believed to be drones. Many of them are drones because they're examining, and this is what a lot of people say. They have looked at the horizon, and you see drone after drone after drone, but what you also see are orbs everywhere. And I have a colleague of mine, he says, well, this is another story that's like the Foo Fighters. So, I mean, it's a number of things at the moment. And until we can pinpoint what it is, I'm keeping a pretty open stance about a lot of things. I mean, I knew about a topic that was told to me by a guy who was a drone operator called Project Convergence, which was something that the governments of the UK, United States, and Australia were working on with drone research. And I was curious if maybe they were doing this project over New Jersey or over other places in the country. I mean, more and more people are reporting these drone incursions. And so that's one of the possibilities, is that we're dealing with a psychological operation or a practice run where, the government doesn't want you to know why they're surveilling, but they're surveilling for a reason that if the public knew, we would be terrified about it. And so that's one of the situations that I lean towards. But the biggest one right now that I think is kind of interesting, and it's all based on synchronicity, okay? It's all based on circumstantial and empirical evidence, which, most of the time doesn't hold up. But when you have a hunch, which I've had hunches 30 years doing this radio show, what's going on is that there was a program that was done many years ago, in fact, during COVID, where they come up with something called Sears 2025, which was a tabletop exercise where there was a very, very, very contagious type of respiratory illness called Sears. And it's SEERS. I'll figure out what the acronym is in just a bit. But anyway, they were talking about Sears 2025, saying that it would come from the sky. That whatever it is, it'd come from the sky, it'd come from the clouds, it'd be in the rain, it'd be in the snow, and people would get sick unexpectedly. Well, days before the incursion of these drones, Peter Hotez, who just happens to be one of the guys, he was kind of like the Dr. Fauci for the poor guy. He would come on TV a lot, and he'd threaten and say a lot of things about pandemics. Well, just before the incursion of the drones, he made a statement. He said, on January 21st, Donald Trump is going to have to deal with several pandemics, several plagues or whatever. And I thought, that sounds like a threat.
It does.
It sounds like it sounds like a threat. And I'm thinking, well, what would trigger this? Well, of course, a lot of things would trigger this. But what could happen is I was reading about these bigger drones and how they can carry anywhere between a 3 to 5 kilogram payload. And so, I mean, that's not very much, but still, there's be enough, if they had aerosol capabilities, there'd be enough aerosol to at least drop over a certain area and test it and see how it works in a gain of function exercise. And that Dr. Fauci talked about gain of function. You know that they quite possibly did this with COVID. I'd say, yes, they did it with COVID. And now if you look at the headlines, what's really creepy is that you have people all over that area where the drones have showed up saying, oh, I'm getting sick, I'm getting puffy eyes, I'm getting a runny nose, I'm getting a cough. Well, duh, it's flu season. But how convenient that a lot of people are getting sick and they don't know what's making people sick. It's not COVID. Something else is making people sick. And in the process, you have stories around the story talking about things like bird flu. In fact, there was an area just today I was reading that chickens are dropping dead and animals are dropping dead, and they're saying it's bird flu. And then they're talking about other people that are getting bird flu. There was something that went down in the Congo a couple of weeks ago where people were having hemorrhagic fevers and they were getting prions in their brains. And we had a doctor come on and say that, yes, one of the biggest fears that they have is a prion outbreak, where people are going to be exposed to prions. And if that's the case, we'll have people getting dementia at young ages. We'll get people, wondering why their bodies won't work. And it's because of the fact that they've exposed themselves to the vaccines, they've exposed themselves to other things, other pollutants. And so there's actually something called micrometeorology, where they are studying the possibility. In fact, in France, they said they found pneumonia bacteria in clouds. And that, you look at the parts per billion, it may not be effective, it may not happen. But have you ever wondered why you keep yourself? We kept ourselves inside during the pandemic. I didn't get COVID. The whole time I didn't get COVID, and I wasn't vaccinated. I didn't get a vaccine. And so I think it's because I spent a lot of time indoors, didn't go to the store, didn't go downtown, didn't do anything, just went to the office, did my show, and came back home. Well, now, since COVID's not around, I've become more active. And I have bouts of cough, I have bouts of sneezing or whatever. I know it has a lot to do with the mold and the rain here in the Pacific Northwest. But just the idea that for 3 years, when COVID was rampant, I didn't get sick at all. I wasn't sick. And now I sometimes feel like I have the flu, but I don't. Or sometimes I feel like I'm having stomach problems. And it's like, it's just a weird feeling. And I just saw a blog today where somebody had posted, everybody's getting sick. Didn't specify, but he says, where I live, New Jersey, I am sick. My neighbors are sick. Everybody's sick. So there you go. And I've always felt that the next attack on this country would be a biological attack. But COVID's already happened. And that was I would say a biological attack. And now we have these other things that Peter Hotez talked about, saying, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Well, how's it going to happen unless they make it happen?
Yeah, that was a direct threat. In my mind, it sounds like he knows exactly what's going to happen. That means somebody has planned it. And the SEERS is severe epidemic enterovirus respiratory syndrome. That's a mouthful. It sounds like nothing that you want to have. And that just brings to mind, last night, I saw a drone over my office, very, very close. It was within 500 to 1,000 feet of me. And I took video of it. And when I tried to download the video, it would not download. I have several videos and stills on an SD card that would not download. I also took video and stills with my cell camera just in case, not thinking there was anything wrong with the SD card in the camera. And those will not download either. They will not download onto my computer. And then as soon as I got home, right after I got done doing that, I became very, very nauseous for no reason, just extremely nauseous. And it lasted for about 45 minutes. And now I'm wondering, after what you said, if that is related to that drone sighting.
Well, you have to understand that I remember Jim Keith back when I was first starting in radio when I first started Ground Zero back in the 1990s. Jim Keith had written a book called Black Helicopters Over America. And I read that book. I was intrigued by that book because living in Utah at the time, we lived near Air Force bases like Hill Air Force Base, Tooele Army Depot, Camp Williams. All these camps were within the area. And we were seeing black helicopters on a daily basis. Okay, so I was fascinated by the black helicopters because obviously they were military. Obviously they had to launch from somewhere. And obviously they were flying low, about 500 feet above my house every day. And so I said to him, it's a normal occurrence here in rural Utah. It's kind of rural Utah at the time. Now it's a city, but I'm just saying it's really weird that in rural Utah, I see these things all the time, Jim. And I don't know what to think of them because I just assume they're military. I live in an area where I'm sure, we have Tooele Army Depot and one of the Area 51 arms out here in Tooele. And then you have Hill Air Force Base, which is where the Janet flights are dispatched for Area 51. Then you have Camp Williams, where it's a pretty big facility for the military. You're all surrounded by the military there. Of course, you're going to see some of these things. But what was going on, Jim told me, was that it wasn't just the fact that they thought they were military, but they were also swooping in, actually going in. The INS would pick people up, of course, round them up and take them back to Mexico. They would sweep in and do DEA busts on marijuana fields. They would do all these things, different things that they were doing, and no one could really pinpoint what was going on with them. And then then I think it was in it was in the 1960s, first 1960s, they had dropped a certain amount of poison, zinc cadmium sulfide. They dropped over St. Louis, and they did it because they felt as though that if they did it, they could see if they could create a smoke screen big enough to hide targets. But what happened is that people inhaled this stuff. They had lung problems. A lot of stillborn babies were had by women, and the government had to admit, and in fact, they settled out of court some 10 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago. They settled out of court after a case that happened in the 60s and 70s. And then in Nevada, there were some black helicopters that sprayed over a field, killed all the cows and killed all the chickens, and then all their plants wouldn't grow. And then they started to come down with symptoms of tiredness, lethargy, all of this. And they said, well, they didn't know what it was. And so now they now we have the chemtrails, we have all this stuff going on.
Yeah.
And it's like they can find many ways to spray, but how do we pinpoint and target an area? We bring drones lower so the spread can be a lot easier. And that's what I fear. I like I said, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence here. I cannot say and go on the record and say, yes, they're doing this, but I just find it kind of weird and synchronistic, especially flu season. There's a lot of plausible deniability, but we'll find out whether it really is the flu or whether or not, yes, bird flu's arrived and they're just kind of like digging at us because they want to have this medical police state. They want to institute it by May. And that's what they want. And people aren't going to go for it unless they have a reason to worry about a new disease that has a mortality rate that's higher than COVID.
That is a very scary thought. But one of the things that I've considered is, first, these drone sightings were seen over major metropolitan areas, near military bases, and it could be anything. But now they're being seen in rural areas. And in my state of Missouri, they have been seen in an area that's outside of Kansas City by some ways in Independence. 30 drones were seen over Lake City Army ammo plant just a couple of weeks ago. Now, 2 nights ago, I saw them in a rural area 45 minutes outside of Independence in the middle of nowhere. And then here in Independence, and I've got people in very rural areas in North Missouri that have been seeing them since the beginning of November and chasing them in their cars as well. It's a very, very strange acting. And also, like you brought up earlier, some of these cases also involve balls of light, which kind of act like they are probes of some type, and then the big object comes in. So in my history of doing UFO investigations, a lot of times people will see balls of light first before they see a big UFO. And now it's happening with the drones as well. I just wonder if there's not a correlation, but your thoughts about some type of disease, contamination being brought in. Sure, they would hit rural areas as well and the small towns as well, to spread it everywhere, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, the 5 kilogram payload, 3 kilogram payload that I talk about is primarily based on some information I got about the project we were talking about earlier, the Convergence project. And so that's the data that I had. But like I said, something about the size of an Escalade, that's what we're looking at. Okay. We're looking at something that big that flies. Okay. And you look at the back of an Escalade and what it can carry, it could probably carry a payload bigger than 5 kilograms. We're looking at something maybe 10, 15, 20 kilograms. And if it's aerosolized, if it's an aerosolized machine or it's an aerosolized type of, pathogen, it's easy to drop from there. And it's easy to drop at night when no one can see it. and then they observe the areas where they were passing, and they go and they basically see if this cadmium sulfide that they dropped had little phosphorus filaments in it, so they could at night go by and they could use the black helicopters to detect where it dropped. So they knew exactly where it dropped because it had markers. Okay. And so
okay, hold that thought.
Need is something, right.
Yeah. Okay. So we're up on a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about phosphorus a little bit more. We'll be back right after this.
Ray Hobbs here for the Unnext Network as we present a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. They apply Cathara energy work with all of their plants and products. All of their products are made in small batches and third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farms topical salve. It comes in 1 ounce and half-ounce sizes made with all natural ingredients. And from now until January 2nd, use promo code KUNX Holiday for an additional 15% off all CBD products. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Unnext Network website at unnextnetwork.com. That's UNXNetwork.com. Promo code KUNX Holiday. The Unnext Network classes and workshops are enrolling now for 2025. If you're interested in psychic protection, chakra balancing, dowsing, or perhaps healing with sound and music, visit unnextnetwork.com to see our complete series of live and on-demand classes and workshops hosted by the one and only Margie K. For example, in January 2025, you could spend 4 Saturdays with Margie for her exclusive live remote viewing workshop. Margie K is one of the most accomplished remote viewers in the world, and she will share her secrets and totally unique methods in this course. Some courses are open now. Seating is limited for these live courses, so register now at unnextnetwork.com. Unnext members use promo code XMEM for an additional 15% discount.
And we're back with the next news. I'm Margie K, and my guest this evening is Clyde Lewis. We are discussing UFOs and drones, mostly drones, around the world. And before the break, we were talking about phosphorus. And we have a huge phosphorus mining plant in Sugar Creek, where we saw a drone 2 nights ago hovering over for several minutes. And
wow,
that makes me wonder, who is interested in the phosphorus?
Well, that's the whole, I had no idea that was the case. Maybe they are loading up on that, and they're using it within whatever the aerosol is, so they can see it at night when they're flying over, to know exactly where they dropped it. And there were times, I don't know if you remember. Do you remember 1-800-GOT-FLU? Do you remember that program?
Oh yeah,
you do. It was a while ago. It was during H5N1, and what had happened is there was some sort of a survey going on where they were asking people if they have the flu. It was a TerraFlu actually promotion, and so you'd call 1-800-GOT-FLU, and they would take down information about where you got the flu, what city you're in, and then for your time and your effort, they would send you a package of TerraFlu to take. And I'm like thinking, who is behind that? What were they thinking? And it's because, again, it sounds a lot like a gain of function exercise.
It does. It certainly does.
Yeah. You get people sick, and then you say to them, hey, can we ask you how sick you are? 1-800-GOT-FLU. And for your time, we're going to send you a free trial pack of TerraFlu, and you can take it to make you feel better. And then we want to get your results again and put you in a database.
Well, who benefits from that? The pharmacies, no doubt.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, who provides us our medications? Who
the
brings us
pharmaceuticals.
medications? Well, where does the pharmaceutical manufacture their medications?
China. Mm-hmm.
So China, when you got 23andMe, you got all of these different spit in a cup things where you spit in a cup and then they have the data on your DNA. They send it to China and they know exactly what they can do to make a disease that focuses on blue-eyed, brown-haired people, or they have a way to develop DNA vaccines that can affect certain people and kill certain people.
Yeah, it's all scary stuff. I pulled up some information while I watched the hearing, and this is okay. Mr. Wheeler from the FBI stated, "We do not know what these drones are or where they come from." How confident are we with this? I mean, the lawmakers are upset, obviously, but somebody is keeping a big secret, not telling anyone anything. I don't think that there has ever been anything like this at this scale in the United States before. Has there?
Right. I don't think so. No. I mean, I don't know if if you count the chemtrail controversy, then yes, we're having a massive spraying right now.
True.
Who knows what it's doing to us? Who knows whether it's pacifying us? Something's up because Americans don't have their fighting spirit anymore, and so whatever maybe they're dropping calmatives on everybody. Who knows what they're doing with the chemtrails? We know that aluminum and barium and all these things are in the chemtrails, or so I say the aerosol stratospheric injections is what they call them in the military. So I mean, there you go. We have a program where they can test. I mean, there was something a while back called MK Naomi, and that was where they did test on several. I mean, San Francisco, they brought in ships in the bay that would actually make fog, so it looked like the fog that usually comes in from the bay, and the fog had serratia in it. Okay, and they wanted to test to see if serratia could be picked up by human beings in the Bay Area, and whether or not the Bay Area would be a good vector for some sort of a biological attack on the United States.
Oh boy. Debbie Ziegelmeyer is the state director for Missouri MUFON, and she got two videos, one a couple nights ago and one last night, of a drone in St. Louis. I'm just going to show that real quick.
All right.
And she said it was loud, and the noise that it made, it sounded like a much, much bigger, like a plane or a helicopter.
Yeah.
The noise.
Right.
But she said it was about the size of an SUV. It was headed towards a top secret facility in St. Louis where they do mapping projects. And both nights, a drone headed in that direction towards that facility. It's scary. This is scary, Clyde. I mean, the only other thing is chemtrails that I've been really scared of. People who have had UFO abductions, been abducted, that's a scary thing. This is worse, I think, because it's totally unknown. We don't know if they're bad actors from other states, if we're being invaded by aliens, or if our own government is doing something to us to lower the population.
Well, that's another thing too, is that their project, what do they call it? The sustainable goals that they have for the New World Order, for the World Economic Forum. Their idea is to depopulate the planet, and they're doing everything they can to depopulate the planet. If you look at something called the Deagle Report, they're saying that we're going to see a substantial reduction in population in the year 2025. So it looks like it's going to be one hell of a ride in the next year. And a lot of people are going to die because of something, whether it be a disease, a nuclear war. Who knows what we're going to have to deal with?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody's expecting something. I mean, we're just sitting on the edge of our seat waiting for the next big thing. Now, another thing I wanted to point out is that I checked with MUFON and NUFORC. UFO sightings have increased by 40 to 60% across the U.S., seemingly
Right.
unrelated because of the description of these objects. But I want to know, what do you think about it being connected to the drones?
Well, here's the thing too, and another venue to go down. Prior to the drone incursion, we had 98 reported UFOs during the Thanksgiving weekend. Now, the drone situation began just before Thanksgiving, and so we had the 98 percentile report. The report of these UFOs were orbs. Okay, many of them were these what they call plasmoid orbs, and they were seen in the skies. And then all of a sudden, we start seeing the drones. And this is where I formulated the opinion that what if they are seeing something strange in the sky? Pilots reporting UFOs over the Pacific Northwest, flying in corkscrew formation. They were doing a number of things. And I'm thinking, well, what if we're seeing all of these UFOs coming? And in order to divert the attention from the UFOs, we decide to launch a group of drones in the sky to get people to just say, well, they were drones. How are you going to say they're UFOs when they're drones? And see, that's the other thing, too, is that you can easily divert the possibility of the public seeing something unusual and keeping it under wraps by bringing in a bunch of drones to confuse people. So it's like the magician's trick where, they distract you with another card and you pick the card they want anyway.
I thought of that, too. And it would be a nifty trick because, yeah, you would be able to say, oh, those are just drones. There's no UFOs. There's nothing to see here. There's no ETs here. Right. And, and this is a little bit on the strange side, but I'm going to bring it up. I do readings for people. I do remote viewing readings for people. The last 2 years, every single person has said to me, I feel like there's something really, really big coming up with UFOs, that it's ET related. And of course, these people don't know each other. I don't tell them anything. They come up with this on their own. They have a feeling. And most of these people actually are ET contactees of some sort. So that makes me wonder, what big thing is coming that has to do with UFOs? Maybe this is it. Maybe these.
Well, and another thing you need to consider too is if a lot of UFO stories don't throw in the component of biological weapons. And if you go back to H.G. Wells and the War of the Worlds, what were the aliens doing? They were not only, the tripods were not only going through Britain, but they were dropping off some red mist that they said was killing people. Okay. And that red mist was creating these red veins going through the land. And that's some of the story that people don't hear. I mean, if you watch George Powell's version of the War of the Worlds, you don't see that. Now, in the new one that they did with Tom Cruise, you do see that, but you don't hear that what they were doing is they were not only, using biological weapons to render us helpless, but then our biologicals killed them. And it was just our bacteria that they weren't used to that killed them. So it's the idea. And how about the movie Signs? How did the aliens kill the people? They didn't just go down and start scratching and killing them and wrestle with them. No, they had this stuff in their hands that would spray some sort of a biological chemical into them that would kill them. So a lot of the time, aliens and biological weapons or aliens and biological attacks have been hand in hand in a lot of stories because the aliens bring with them all kinds of diseases that we're not used to. It's like Columbus when he came to the New World. He brought with him smallpox, diarrhea, all these things, and it killed off the people. So, I mean, if you think that maybe we have an infiltration or an incursion of UFOs where they're spraying us with something, that's another possibility. There's so many different possibilities when they tell you, we don't know what they are, but listen to us. We know what to do about them. You ever found that interesting? And same with COVID.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know anything about COVID, but please do as we say because we know something about what needs to be done. Doesn't make sense.
And they say, we don't know what they are, but we don't think there's a credible threat. Really? How do you assess that?
How is it if you don't know what they are, you don't know what their purpose is?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's double talk and it creates double think.
the other day Trump said he knows that the president and the government knows what's going on, but they're not saying. So to me, that means he has been briefed, but he cannot speak about it. Do you think he'll talk about it after the inauguration?
No, I don't.
Really?
I'm hoping. What I'm thinking. No, I'm thinking they want it to fade away. I mean, they now have this ability to get out of the public eye, and in fact, if you look at the national news, for some reason they didn't learn anything from the past election. All they do is talk about politics. It's all they talk about, and that's why people tune out, because they're getting stories from the alt media that are connected to stories. Some politics, of course, because it's a part of our lives, but. I just think that they avoid stories like this, because as long as they don't stoke the fires, I mean, how do you get somebody to have a story die? You just ignore it. You ignore the story, and people think, well, I guess it's all over now because I didn't see it on the nightly news.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So
I also think
that's the problem.
I also think that the number of drones being sighted are not being reported by the media. And the reason I say that is I've watched a couple of different charts and maps where they say, oh, these are the states where the drone sightings have been. Well, they're leaving out a bunch of states, because I'm getting reports from Nevada, Arkansas, Missouri, of course, and other places, Minnesota. They're not on the map. And they're only seeing, there's been 5,000 drone sightings around the world. Well, I don't think so. I think we can probably take that times 20. So the media is complicit in this too, in not giving us the entire truth. And so I wonder about what their motives are.
Well, see, that's the point. They don't want, I mean, look, do they want to come out and say, oh, by the way, this is a part of a psychological operation to test our reaction to an invasion of either aliens or an invasion from a hostile actor? Or, hi, this is a psychological operation where what we're doing is we're flying into various areas near important sites, and we're actually spraying them with some sort of a biological weapon that will eventually mature and incubate for a few days, and then people have full-on bird flu. See, this is the thing, is that they don't want to tell you because there's some sort of operation that either we're carrying out, and it'll be a false flag. If it does get brought up, it will be a false flag. They'll say, well, Iran was doing it, or some other country was doing it, when in reality we were doing it to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, our government was doing it to us. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Well, we're in the thick of it. I know you're going to keep covering this subject, as am I. But I did want to move on to another subject based on your show last night that I found very interesting. And since it's right before Christmas, why not? Right? So
Sure.
You discussed Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol and the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And you took a look at the dark side of that and some of the kind of physics side of it as well. And I was wondering if you would just kind of go over that very briefly.
Well, I think that if you go back and you remove all the jingle bells and all of the festive type of, I guess you could say, trappings of the stories of Scrooge and the trappings of the story of George Bailey, I think you'll find that, they should reissue these movies as Christmas horror and science fiction. And that at the time that they were written, especially in the 1800s with Dickens had opened the door for all kinds of paranormal thought processes, including ghosts, out-of-body experiences, time travel, being able to time travel. But the problem that he had was that he was speculating about time travel without reoccurring the idea of a paradox, because we have Scrooge seeing himself in the present, past, and in the future. That would create a paradox. But still, he wrote Scrooge, A Christmas Carol, prior to H.G. Wells writing his story about the time machine. So the idea of time travel, and maybe I think 3 years after the time machine was written. It was Tesla that said, well, I found a way to do time travel. So who knows? Maybe the idea of time travel was inspired by Charles Dickens and his little story about a man that travels through time. Otherwise, we're seeing a story where a man dies 3 times before Christmas and is getting a lesson in how to be reborn when they find him in a pauper's grave in the future. As far as George Bailey is concerned, here we have a man who decides he wants to kill himself. That's pretty dark. And then an angel shows up, or I mean, you could say an angel or some sort of an alien or some sort of a supernatural being shows up and says, okay, this is what your life would be like if you were dead. This is what your life would be like if you never existed. Okay. So that's another tinkering of timelines, another tinkering of the possibility of a paradox. And so just the idea of, I mean, this is like the grandfather paradox where, you know, people say, well, if I go back in time and kill my grandfather, I won't exist. Well, instead of killing the grandfather, they just remove this substance altogether. And so these are some pretty fascinating quantum ideas that are presented at Christmas time. And one of the biggest quantum ideas is Santa Claus. I mean, look, I know a lot of people are saying, well, you know, Santa Claus, you know, you have to tread lightly with Santa Claus. Either you don't tell the kids or you do tell the kids or whatever. No, it's a very good mythology, but it can be spun into a lot of education as well, where we talk about the reality of what can happen and the mythologies that can't happen, and because of physics. But when quantum physics come to play, when Heisenberg's uncertainty principle comes to play, we treat Santa Claus as an atom that smears everywhere. We don't know where he is exactly, but we have to assume he's there because in the hearts of children, they believe that there are presents put under the tree by Santa Claus. And so in the ether, Santa exists. In the ether, a child can shake hands with Mickey Mouse. And that's an area that people like you, Margie, play in. You know, you play in those areas because you're a remote viewer. You play in those areas because you're able to go into dream time, dreamscapes, collective unconscious, as Carl Jung had talked about. All those things are real. And if we were able to manifest them, in fact, one of the things that Dickens said is he said, the first step to time travel is recall. The minute you can recall something that happened to you in your past, that you can recall the detail, all you have to do is contemplate it over and over again, and you're back in that time frame. That's simple recall. That's like, there's nothing magical there. The brain can do that. So what we do is we find a way, instead of transmitting consciousness into a computer, we find a way to transmit recall into a computer. And then a computer can put us in a simulation where we're living through that time period again, where loved ones are back, where you know, old dogs we had that had passed away are back with us. It would be a lot of fun to do that rather than, you know, putting yourself in a lonely position in a simulation where all you're doing is just standing around as an icon doing nothing. You're an NPC, you're a non-player. And I think that just the idea of Christmas and the idea of all of these quantum ideas that haven't been even put into play yet because no one's had the time or effort to do so, bring hope to people, because that means that the theory is that we do have a quantum life, that life is forever, and it always is based on light frequency, and love. And so what a great way to think of life after death. What a great way to think of how the spring and the winter, you know, spring is birth, winter's death, and the spring comes again as a promise. That's always been the cycle. That's always been the meaning of Christmas, is that in the darkest of times, we seek the light. And the light has always been a faith in a savior, the faith in a Messiah, the faith in someone who will deliver us and save us from all the perils we feel in the wintertime. And that's why I think a lot of people need to look forward to, at least if they can't think of an existence here, think of yourself on a quantum level and realize that everything you do is important. It's part of the time continuum. You contribute to it whether you know it or not.
That's a really good message for people, especially this time of year. A lot of people feel lonely and isolated, and you know, if their family members are missing, dig into your memories about your family and your loved ones who have crossed over. That is how you can time travel. Yeah, and then the creation part. I believe that there is a Santa Claus. The reason is I think it is a thought form that has been created by humanity. And it's also similar to the Slender Man and other things like that.
You're right. You are so right.
It starts out with a story and a myth, and then it becomes real. And I know because I have seen it myself. The Slender Man.
I had an experience. Oh, you've seen Slender Man. Well, I had an experience one year where I cut my foot on the way home from school. My father broke his leg in an accident, and I couldn't go out. I was a teenager. I could have gone out and done Christmas shopping for my family and have presents under the tree. It was a year where we weren't going to have any presents under the tree. One night, it was very foggy, and this is a true story. Very foggy, very snowy. We get a knock at the door. Standing there is this man, really big guy. He wasn't fat. He was just this big, husky guy. He had a Texas accent. He was wearing dark glasses. He had the Santa hat and the Santa suit on. It was a rudimentary Santa suit. The beard was, fake. But the thing is he was there, and in his car were presents. In the car. He brought them in. He sat them in front of the tree, and he said, ho, 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 thank you. And it was weird because he just disappeared. And so it wasn't a traditional Santa. It wasn't. I mean, in fact, he was scary looking. He was like Bigfoot as Santa Claus. It was huge. And he dropped off presents at our house. And they were things we wanted for Christmas. I mean, us kids, we wished for. And they did show up, and they were there under the tree. And that really, I mean, whoever that was, I'll never know who that was because I didn't recognize him. I had no clue who he was because usually you can figure out who's wearing the beard, who's wearing the suit. Didn't know who he was, didn't care. All I know is my family got presents for Christmas, and we didn't know who the Santa Claus was. It was Santa to me. And that will never leave my mind because it just boggled my mind that Santa showed up even though we didn't believe in him.
Clyde, I just remote viewed it. I can give you an answer if you want.
Okay, sure.
There was a man, and a message got to him by probably your higher selves. I'm not sure, but a higher vibration got to this person, told him what to do. He didn't even know what he was doing. And then when he was done and got home, he forgot about the whole thing.
That sounds like in my heart, I think that's true. I mean, I don't know it, but I get the inkling that you're right because it just sounds comfortable to me that somebody, not even knowing why he was doing it, did it, showed up, probably came home, and if you were to confront him and say, you were Santa that night, he'd probably say, I don't know what you're talking about.
No, he would not.
It happens. People are.
It does happen.
And that's another thing about the quantum Santa idea, quantum Santa effect, is that we always want to see the real Santa. But what if Santa Claus is tachyon? What if the spirit of Santa is tachyon, and that every year we somehow get this tachyon type of stuff attracting to us, and it changes us in ways that we don't normally act. And then when it's all over, we go back to being our grumpy selves. We go back to being our, business as usual selves. But at Christmas time, something's different. Something's different about us at Christmas time. Either we get very depressed or we get very happy. We get very joyous. It's because there's some sort of a vibrational string type of thing that gets into us, and it creates that type of, I guess you could say, mental illness, if you want to call it that, or psychosis, where we have Christmas psychosis or something to that effect. I don't know what you'd call it, but it's just the idea of, if you believe in tachyon particles, which again are just as it's just as hypothetical as black holes. But if you believe in black holes, if you believe in tachyon particles, then you may even want to try and believe in Santa Claus. It's true.
Most excellent, Clyde. How can people listen to your show?
I'm everywhere. I'm on the UNX network, which is awesome. I'm also on groundzero.radio, which is our 24-hour paranormal station as well. We have one, but we have also what is called our little digital playground, where you can listen to past shows. You can talk with people in our chat room. We have social media. We have, if you want to do research with documents, you can look them up in our documents section. We got videos that are interesting. It's at aftermath.media. It's a subscription, but it's $10 for all that stuff. And every once in a while, once a month, I show up and we have a chat just like you and I are having right now. And it's just my way of getting to know the listeners. We become one big family in the process. It's really awesome. I get to see some of the listeners, and we all care about each other. We had one listener that disappeared for a while. Come to find out, she was in the hospital. But see, that's the thing, is that it's a community that cares for one another.
It's a family,
and we all are together. Yeah, we're family, and it's awesome.
Yep, we got it. We're family here too, and we're glad to have you as a member of our family. So thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. I know you're a busy guy, and got
a show tonight about the Star of Bethlehem, whether it was a UFO or something else. So there we go.
I'll be listening.
Cool.
All right. Thank you so much, Clyde. Clyde Lewis with Ground Zero. Don't miss the show. Starts at 9:00 Central Time tonight, and he goes for 3 hours. It's always good. Always most excellent show. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'm Margie K, and I will see you here again next week.